This happened a year ago, and I'm still pretty freaked out. We were up at my father-in-law's for Christmas. He lives in South Jersey in a pretty remote area north of Burn State Forest. It's quiet and always a little eerie, but it felt especially weird with an overcast weather and unseasonable warmth of the last few days. We did Christmas dinner at my brother-in-law's, and we got back pretty late. Because of the radiator heat and outside temps, we slept with the windows open. I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and as I was drifting back to sleep, I heard a low wail building in volume for a few seconds before stopping abruptly. I figured it was just an odd-sounding bird and tried to go back to sleep. It happened twice more over the course of maybe 5 minutes. I was basically able to put it out of my head and start drifting back to sleep when I heard a loud, shrill blast like a too high-pitched elephant's trumpet. At this point, I shot up with my heart racing. I knew I had to close the window, and I took a beat to build up to it. When I dragged myself out of bed, I peeked through the shutters before I shut the window pane. Whatever it was, it had tripped its motion sensor light in the back of the property and was half illuminated, standing maybe 100 feet from the back door right at the tree line. It was cloaked with its head partially shrouded. The bottom of its face looked flat and round like the back of a dinner plate, with another smaller half-uncovered black circle in the center of it. I immediately slammed the window shut and it didn't move. It just stood there with its face tilted towards the window. I was pretty much in shock and thought I was losing my mind, but I shut the blinds and crept back into bed and basically hid until the sun came up. I didn't hear any more sounds. I dared another look out of the window after dawn and the figure was gone. I managed to drift back to sleep for a few more hours. Has anyone ever seen anything like this or know what it might be? I've been frantically Googling, but nothing really came up. I tried to post this earlier this year but didn't have enough karma. I'm excited to get to now because I've never met anyone with a similar experience or similar situation until I found this group. Around Christmas 2023, I had put my son down for a nap in his playpen in the playroom downstairs. I went into the living room, sat on the couch, and started watching The Office on TV and folded laundry. When I was finished, I pulled my blanket over me and laid down on a pillow my son had brought into the living room earlier that morning. I had dozed off soon after. A short time later, I woke up to my baby crying. I remember looking out of the window and wondering how long I'd been asleep because it was dark outside. I checked my phone that was plugged into the charger on the arm of the couch for the time. It was almost 7 o'clock. I specifically remember looking at the Christmas tree as I walked by. I walked back to the playroom, changed his diaper, walked into the kitchen to throw away the diaper and make him a bottle. After I gave him his bottle, I walked back into the living room to lay down on the couch, but my pillow and my blanket were gone. The laundry was still folded beside, but still the couch looked untouched. Even my phone was gone. I looked in all of the rooms I had gone in and even the bathroom and thought maybe it just fell into the couch. Around that time, my boyfriend was getting home from work and I asked him to call my phone because I couldn't find it. I heard it ringing upstairs in our bedroom. I hadn't been upstairs at all and I was freaking out at this point. My boyfriend and I go up to our bedroom to find my phone plugged up to the charger beside my bed and on the bed with my blanket and my pillow. As if I was asleep in my bed the whole time. I was so confused because I know for a fact I never walked up or down those stairs and the TV in the living room was still on The Office. I still think about it all the time and the only way I can make sense of it all is that maybe I experienced a glitch. I, a 24-year-old female, lives with my aunt, her husband, and their 2 kids who are 15 years old and 2 years old. My biological sisters and I pretty much helped raise her kids, so we see them as bonus siblings. The 15-year-old was sleeping over at a friend's house. My uncle was at work, and my aunt was decorating a float for a Christmas parade that weekend. I was home alone with the 2-year-old from 4:30 to 10 p.m. I'm used to sitting for him, and besides the standard toddler antics, he's not a bad kid. About an hour before she came home, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner and her son was playing in the living room with his toys and watching cartoons on YouTube. Out of nowhere, I hear him let out a terrified scream and he came running into the kitchen crying. As soon as he saw me, he waddled over and clunked onto my pant leg and wouldn't let go. I picked him up and he buried his face into my hoodie, still crying. When I asked him what was wrong, he kept pointing to the door saying, "Door! Door!" According to my aunt and uncle, the house has history. Before my uncle bought it in 1989, two brothers allegedly killed each other on the property. I felt uneasy from time to time, and while my brother has done odd things before, never have I seen him get this scared before. Whatever he saw, it scares me too. With the alleged deadly history of the house, I don't doubt that something still lingers here even after decades later. We do know, however, that there's a protective spirit amongst us, my aunt's late grandfather. Still, seeing him so petrified has me shaken to my core. I want to start by saying I apologize how long this is. I need to get some of these stories off of my chest, especially after what happened 2 weeks ago. So here we go. I've always believed my parents' house was haunted. Let me give you some backstory. The house I grew up in, I knew was haunted. I was born and raised in a house, and from the ages 4 to 6, I saw some things that I still don't believe. Unfortunately, my parents saw and heard them too. That's not what this story is about though. We moved into the new house the year I turned 6. My parents hoped that nothing would haunt it, but I always had this weird feeling. This one room, we called it the orange room due to the bright orange carpet it had when we moved in. It was sort of an in-between room. It sat directly in the middle of the house and acted as a sort of secondary living room. This room was connected to the main living room, the kitchen, and the bedrooms together, so you had to walk through it to get anywhere else in the house. I hated it. Something about that room felt off. The first few years we lived there, nothing really happened. My consistent and repetitive nightmares from my old house, also another story for later, has stopped. I thought that maybe nothing would go wrong with this place, until that one night. The new house sat on old train tracks. The tracks were pulled up and turned into a road, but the old wood was still used in some of the construction of the new housing. I didn't know this. I was about 9 at the time when I started to hear it, the train whistle. I was sitting in an orange room, playing with the Legos. I looked outside of the large bay windows and saw nothing, no one. We no longer have any trains running anywhere within a 50-mile radius of the house. I just asked my mom about it, and she said that I probably heard a truck horn. The thing is, I was obsessed with trains at the time, and I knew the difference between a train's whistle and a truck's horn. This was definitely a train. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my imagination, until one day when my neighbor mentioned that she had wood from the old train tracks in her house. I got chills, and I knew what I was hearing was really a train whistle. I knew I wasn't crazy. Things seemingly got worse after that. My mom tried to hide it, but I knew she was just as scared as me. One night, something she couldn't explain happened, and I didn't know if I could believe her. I was 12 at the time, and I knew about the small weird things that my mom heard and saw, like the shadow of a cat sprinting from behind a chair, or some pictures being knocked over on the table, or a Christmas bell ringing when she was home alone. She kept chalking it up to minor things. The window was open, the air was on, it was a breeze, etc. One night though, she couldn't explain it. The clock in the main living room was heavy and hung over on the wall above our fireplace. Beneath the clock was the mantle where my mom kept all of the picture frames with the picture of myself, my sister, and my cousins. It was fall, so there was added Halloween decorations as well. I don't remember exactly how late it was, but we all fell asleep pretty fast. My mom heard a loud crashing sound coming from the living room, and she freaked out. She woke up my dad and urged him to go take a look, but he was so exhausted. She had to drag him out of bed, and they both made their way down to the living room. What they both saw, neither of them could explain to this day. The clock had fallen off of the fireplace. It should have fallen straight down right into the mantel, right? No, it didn't even touch the mantel. The mantel was in pristine condition. Nothing had been removed. The clock, however, was about 10 feet away from the fireplace, in the middle of the living room, face down. My dad and mom tried to recreate the situation in the morning, but the fireplace was brick. Nothing that they did, not even a breeze or a draft or the AC, could have caused it to go that far. A few more years went by before the next incident. It was winter and I was about 16. I would play games late into the night on the weekends, and it was about 2 a.m. when I was finally turning off everything to go to bed. Every time I would shut everything off, I would look into the large bay window by the orange room just to make sure that the lights outside was turned off. And this night, when I looked outside, I noticed that the lights had been turned off, but something was staring back at me. I freaked out and sprinted to my parents' room, waking them both up. I told them that I saw what looked like a man with an extremely long face staring at me through the window. My dad grabbed his metal bar and went into the living room. Nothing. No person, no footsteps, no tracks in the snow. I knew what I saw. It definitely was a face. That's when the nightmares started to return, the exact same ones from when I was a kid. Other weird occurrences started to happen, like a tan figure standing in the background of one of my Snapchat pictures, which was in the background of the orange room, or a distorted selfie I took where my eyes were blacked out, also standing in that room. I moved out soon after, and I escaped the nightmares and the weird experiences once more. I would visit from time to time, but nothing else seemed to happen. That is until 2 weeks ago. We were decorating for Christmas, and I was happily moving ornaments from one tree to another when I heard it. The strange familiar sound of my mom's Charlie Brown snow globe playing music. I whipped my head around, stopped dead in my tracks, and watched the snow globe suddenly stop playing. I couldn't breathe. My mom entered the orange room and saw me standing there pale as a ghost, she said. And then she asked if I turned the dial on the snow globe. I told her no and straightened my posture. I told her I was passing through, and I showed her the ornaments that I was holding. And I explained that I couldn't have turned the dial. It's on the bottom of the snow globe and would require the use of both of my hands to turn it, as it's old and hard to spin. I asked when she put that snow globe out on the shelf, wondering if it was leftover movement in the mechanism from when she put it out. She told me she put it out 5 hours prior when I had just woken up. It couldn't have been residual movement. I don't want to go back in that room. I feel so weird when I do. Christmas is coming up and I know I have to, but I really don't want to. It sucks, but I'm dreading what will happen the next time I go in. So I don't know if I'm posting this update properly or not. I apologize in advance if I've done it wrong. Regardless, I posted in a subreddit about a week ago explaining the activity that happened at my parents' house as of recent. In that post, I referenced a few different occurrences that I've experienced. This post details those experiences. As I've mentioned in my previous posts, the house that I was born and raised in was definitely haunted. Everyone in my family knew it. There wasn't even a single doubt or question. Everyone in my family has their own story there. This is my story and a part of my parents as well. It apparently started all about a year after my sister was born. That's what I've been told anyways. I was 3 and my younger sister was 1. My mother would stay in my sister and I's bedroom, rocking my sister until both of us fell asleep. Unfortunately for my mother, I was an avid sleep talker. She noticed several times that I would talk, in my sleep mind you, about a little girl. She was tucking me in when I told her about the little girl sitting at the end of my bed. Apparently, I began to mention this occurrence several times for the next few months. My parents were worried for me and my sister, so they began preparing our toy room as a grown-up kid's bedroom, as they called it. Little did I know they were hoping for the activity to be at an end once we moved rooms, but boy, they were wrong. Over the next year, my parents both noticed strange occurrences that had no logical explanation. We had no pets, no rodent issues, nothing. This meant that all of the following happened with no one in the room or no outside presence to cause it. I had this plush toy that when you shake it, it would play music and light up with bright reds and pinks. It wasn't until a few years ago that I was told the real reason why the toys were locked up in bins and hidden from us. Apparently, several nights in a row, my parents would hear music playing from the living room downstairs. They would come downstairs together thinking that it was a robber perhaps that had broken in. What they found instead was the plush toys singing, the red and pink lights glistening off the white walls. My dad is not a believer in ghosts and still states that he doesn't believe in them to this day. However, when I asked him about that story, he couldn't explain what could have caused it. He hates that he couldn't explain it and often tries to change the subject. My parents finally moved my sister and I into a new bedroom when I was 4 and she was 2. This is when the weird shit starts to happen. I began having these terrifying nightmares. I still remember them to this day. It was always one of 2 nightmares that never changed. The first one wasn't too terrible. I would be chased by this large monster, and no matter where I hid, I'd always be found and be dragged out of the house. The second nightmare, however, would be a recurring nightmare that stuck with me for literal years after I moved out. The second nightmare consisted of myself sleeping alone in a new bedroom. I would wake up after hearing a weird noise, but I wouldn't be able to move, and I would be forced to watch as the nightlight at the end of my bed caught fire. The fire would spread onto my bedsheet and would get closer and closer to me until I woke up screaming. These nightmares continued until I was 5. One night, I was asleep in the living room. I must have been taking a nap during a pretty bad thunderstorm because my parents said that they would never leave me alone downstairs, especially in the dark. However, I remember this incident so vividly that I can still see it to this day. As I woke up from my nap, I opened my eyes to find a massive white figure leaning over me. I panicked, and because I was a child, threw my blanket over my head and cowered. A few minutes later, I removed the blanket to find nothing was there but the dark living room. I raced upstairs and grabbed my dad, crying. He grabbed a baseball bat and went downstairs to find who was in the house. All of the doors, windows, entrances to the house were locked and hadn't been tampered with at all. My dad tested every single one himself, tried to break them, etc. Nothing. They couldn't explain that one. Neither could I. The nightmares stopped for a while after this incident, but they didn't stay gone. Around the time we bought the new house, the fire nightmares started up again. It was more vivid this time and would cause extreme nausea and panic. My parents didn't know what to do and would just sleep on the floor of me and my sister's bedroom so that way we could sleep peacefully. We finally moved out of that damn house when I was 6 years old. The fire nightmare plagued me for another 3 years or so before it finally stopped. Thankfully, I was able to rest. Unfortunately, not for very long. As I mentioned in my previous post, the nightmares returned with a vengeance. The same nightmare over and over again. I'm a little girl, trapped in my bed as the fire reaches closer and closer. When I moved out of my parents' new house and got an apartment, the nightmares thankfully stopped. I haven't had it since, but I still remember it. I remember every detail. I remember every single detail about the white figure too. My family, however, doesn't remember though. My dad remembers grabbing a baseball bat and running downstairs, but he doesn't remember why. My mom remembers me screaming and crying at night all the time, but she doesn't remember what I told her about my nightmares, just that they was terrifying. I wish I could put my mom's, dad's, and sister's accounts of everything that they went through on here. Mostly included Christmas ornament bells ringing loudly while they were in a room for no reason, items being moved from one place to another but no one touched them, weird shadows, voices, etc. But unfortunately, I do not have all of these details 100% committed to memory. We often reshare the stories with each other, but my sister hates them. Frankly, so do I. Sometimes we visit the old house, usually the park in front of when we go to our neighbor's craft show down the street. My parents know the people who moved in. One day, I plan to ask them if they've seen or heard anything too. I'm curious to know what had happened to them over the course of the last 17 years that they've lived there. When I park in front of the old house, I glance up into my old bedroom window on the second floor to see if I can see anything inside. I've never seen anything, but I hate being so close to it. I visited again this year, and I decided that maybe next year I'll park somewhere else. I hate that house, and I always will. I hope one day that I'll find out if we all were justified in what we saw and heard. Just to know if someone else felt the same fear that we did. If that day ever comes, I'll be sure to update. Until that day, though, I will stay far away from that house if possible.